One of the things that we want to do at this conference is also have some conversations. So next is a panel. And just so you know, what's coming after that is a conversation at your table. So all of these great questions that you have, capture them so that you can have a conversation with the folks who you are working with, questions that you might want to direct out. Kind of awesome to be at a conference and be like, well, and then I asked the CEO directly for a feature that I wanted. That's excellent. For our very first panel, this is about executive visions for the cloud and for the cloud shift. So the first shift was about migrating to the cloud. This second shift is about making the cloud improve itself using smart AI tools and even smarter design. So for this conversation, we're looking for executive level advice on hiring the right team and assembling the right tools. To moderate, we're going to invite Vineet Bhaskar to the stage. Where are you? Our moderator, the CRO here at Sedai. Vineet has been tasked with turning cloud chaos into sustainable success. With 25 years in SaaS, he is the guy who knows how to sell smart automation to even the toughest engineers. Yes, that's you. He speaks fluent engineer, and listening to these conversations, I would argue that is indeed a language. And if anyone can make autonomous cloud management sound like the future we actually want, it's Vineet. So you are in our first chair. Will you be playing the acoustic electric guitar at all today?
Not today.
Not
that is
today.
A high bar intro. Thank you.
Next to the stage, we want to invite Anoop Gopalara Krishna. I tried really hard. I practiced like 4 times. Oh, try. Is the vice president of engineering at Guidewire, where he leads the development of their cloud native platform, serving over 540 insurers across 40 countries. Do you sleep?
Rarely.
Excellent. Anoop is at the forefront of building self-optimizing infrastructure for the insurance industry. His not-so-secret wish, reinforced by being part of the recent DevTrails hackathon, is to return to academia one day, where he dreams about discovering something new with an amazing class of students.
Absolutely.
Nice. All right, and then save the best for last. Is that true? Sai? 2 more, excuse me. Sai Devambraktori. Prior to Oracle, he was a senior director of engineering at Google, and prior to that at PayPal. Were you part of the PayPal mafia? I wish. All right, and then finally, Srivatsan Kanchi is a seasoned technology leader with expertise in building and scaling mission-critical high-scale platforms, most recently spearheading Intuit's machine learning platform, including real-time distributed featurization, scoring, and feedback loops. With a strong background in platform engineering at Intuit, eBay, and SeatGeek. He's known for balancing deep technical insight with a sharp customer focus. Everyone have a microphone? All right. Gentlemen, races.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a seat. Have a seat, gentlemen. So really exciting group of folks to dive into a conversation here. We heard the theme, right? The first shift was all around getting to the cloud. And the second shift is now all around how do you master the cloud? How do you use it as a strategic vehicle to gain competitive advantage? And, joined here by some great technology leaders. And so we're just gonna dive right in, because I think there's a ton of areas to explore here. It starts with cloud strategy, right? And as you think about cloud strategy, how do you approach this massive challenge that is the cloud, right? Complexity is growing. I have to strike the right balance of cost, performance, security, optimization, and availability. How do you think about those things? How do you think about leveraging the cloud to create outcomes? And it really starts with the executive leadership and the decisions that you're making. And so with that, I'll first ask you, Anoop, and maybe provide a little bit of your background as you're answering the first question around cloud strategy and how you're thinking about it at Guidewire.
Yeah, so my background is I've been doing platform engineering for the past 15 years or so. Prior to joining Guidewire, I was with a company called Pivotal. Many of you who've used Spring or Cloud Foundry would remember from those days. So I was part of that, their R&D team building out Cloud Foundry. I joined Guidewire with the idea of my current boss and also my ex-boss at later in a previous company. Guidewire had a unique position in terms of as an insurance software vendor. We were among the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We had the most rich set of features for our customers to be able to drive their insurance needs. The problem was it was running on premise. And the problem with on premise is the snowflakes each one develops, because each of the software could be customized to the, sky's the limit. How do you then get to a point where you need all of these 500 customers to be able to upgrade at the same time? There is no compulsion, there is no need or value that they would see. In addition to that, the customers had to obviously run these systems on their varied sets of data centers, cloud, etc., not particularly driving the value of the software that we were building. And as part of our initial vision was to how do we get them onto the cloud so that we can build value for them, not just at the level of operative benefits, but also in terms of what we can do next generation in terms of insurance. And that's where we started building out a development platform, not an IDP, because it's not just for our internal developers, but also for our developers of our customers. It wasn't easy. It's 7 years back. Cloud was mainstream enough, but insurance is not exactly one of those industries that would go blazing in saying, "Oh, this is a new technology. Let's go do this." So it took a lot of cajoling, a lot of business deals, etc., which I'm not a part of, thankfully. I just do the engineering stuff. Getting them onto the cloud. Our first customer got onto cloud in 2019 December, and since then we've not looked back. It's been steady progress, and every one of our customers sees the value in having running the software on our Guidewire Cloud platform, which provides not just the base value in terms of how do I deploy things on the cloud, but then how do I improve my time to market. I want to try something out. How do I get it onto the cloud ASAP, along with security, along with the speed, along with the knowledge that they have, the support that they'll need, and the things would still run. So that's where we started.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to come back to the Guidewire Cloud in a few minutes because I was reading some very interesting things around what you're doing that I think the audience would love to hear. Srivasan, tell me about SeatGeeks. Very interesting company. I'm a fan and a customer. And I learned last night that my beloved football team, the Washington Commanders, are a big SeatGeek customer. So I was happy to hear about that. Talk to me a little bit about your role, and then how are you thinking about cloud strategy, and maybe going a little deeper, like how do you think about that balance of kind of how to optimize kind of cost, performance, security as you think about your cloud strategy?
Sure. Thank you, Vaneet. SeatGeek is a unique company in that we were born in the cloud. So the challenges that we have in SeatGeek are that we've seen every generation of the cloud since 2009, and therefore a lot of the mistakes that were made in 2009 to 2015. We have all generations of IAC, be it CloudFormation, Sparkle Formation, Terraform, and Kubernetes, ACK, and so on. So the biggest challenge for us has been how do we get SeatGeek to 2025 cloud standards so that we can innovate from there while being focused on the fan-first experience that we are really driving towards. And thank you for being a SeatGeek customer. And most of you may not have used SeatGeek because we don't have a geographic presence on the West Coast. But on the East Coast and in the Midwest, we are a major ticketing partner for NFL teams and NBA teams. So our focus is on building fan-first experiences, and we want to make sure that our developers are innovating and delivering great value. Like Suresh said earlier, we want the engineers to focus on what they do best, which is build great stuff for our fans and our customers. And that's where we want the cloud to fade into the background and not really be a top of mind. And the way we are approaching that is by first upgrading everything from 2009 to 2024 to 2025 standards, and then building on top of that.
Thank you. Sai, let's talk a little bit about your background and experience, from your time at PayPal through Google and now with Oracle. You've certainly seen a lot of large enterprise experience and how these enterprises are adopting cloud and leveraging cloud. I'd love to get your perspective on just overall kind of cloud strategy and how do you sort of think about, people, process, tooling in that context.
Yeah. First of all, I've been voluntold to be part of this at the last minute. So with that caveat, my thoughts on cloud strategy is it's important to get the principles first, cost structure second, and the governance the third. So how do you get the principles? Principles is like writing a design doc for your organization, for the technology, for the platform. What does the design doc look like? What is your security posture going to be? What is your risk management posture going to be, right? And things like, what is the cost of the developer velocity? Where do you draw the line, right? And also what's the need for multi-cloud or hybrid cloud? So all of these things need to be more of a deterministic in nature upfront rather than discover on the go later on, because what happens is you don't optimize for the entire platform or the entire system if you fix them later on. So it's very important to get them right from the get-go. Another reason why that's important is there is a strong tendency to retain what you have as we migrate from on-prem to the cloud, but it's a different architectural altogether. It's a complete paradigm shift, right? For example, for some use cases, the performance is better on-prem than in the cloud. For other use cases, it's very easy to get a DR in the cloud than in the on-prem. But you don't need to have like-to-like DR. You get the same DR, but with a lot less cost, right? So, a lot of these things go into that, being very opinionated about having that design doc as a first step. And it also acts as a forcing function for everybody to know what does the platform mean. For example, the finance organization may look like whatever is the current baseline is the platform, or the cost structure should not go beyond that. That's their view, right? And a product manager may look like, I only want to talk about the new features. That's all, right? But there is a cost to everything. Nobody think about risk management as a primary function. It's a secondary, right? Compliance and all those things will come into picture the same way. And also from a reliability perspective, it is also an afterthought, right? So it's an opportunity to educate and get everybody on the same page. And then the cost structure should come into play, not the other way around. Those are my thoughts.
Great. Thank you for that. Anoop, Guidewire has recently reported some very strong earnings and performance results. And it was interesting to see Guidewire tout the Guidewire Cloud as a big driver of some of those earnings. I mean, even talking about cloud margins, which I thought was very interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the Guidewire Cloud and how you're kind of leveraging it for strategic advantage?
Sure. It was not just in this earnings call. I'm pretty sure our CEO, Mike, has mentioned that in multiple earnings calls by now. But that said, yes, one of the things I agree with what my co-panelist mentioned about is building out this common substrate, right? Building up a language which everybody can speak, which is not independent of each other, and we're not talking at each other, we're talking together, understanding the same vocabulary is very important. As part of that, we built out a common substrate on top of Kubernetes. And like he was mentioning about it melting into the background, right? How do I enable my developers as well as our customers to do their functions? They do not care anything about the infrastructure, and they shouldn't. How do I get to a point where all I have to mention is my intent, and that intent is executed behind the scenes through some form factor which could be autonomous or semi-autonomous in a manner of speaking. So we built out a substrate on top of Kubernetes. We customized it to a point where now I have developers contributing back into the Kubernetes ecosystem or into the CNCF ecosystem. We're now maintainers of somebody asked about IAC for a long time now. Terraform is great. In some aspects, we've actually moved away from Terraform for the simple reason that we're not able to reconcile or have those control loops working constantly, right? You change something with Terraform, and then somebody goes and changes this outside to using a console. The next time you apply a Terraform, it's out of sync. How do we make sure that that sync is constant and that control loop is constant? So we've now, along with Alibaba and Microsoft, are part of maintainers of an open source project called Kubevela, which abstracts Terraform as well as through other platform ecosystem tools like Crossplane, manage resources. So basically, as an application developer, I could go to the Kubernetes console and say, hey, I just want an application. It needs a database, and these are my parameters, or I could just abstract those parameters out if it's a default database he wants. And once the database is created, I need the secrets to be injected into my applications as a 12-factor app. All of that is done behind the scenes. As a developer, he doesn't have to do it. Now, how this has helped us on the margins that you mentioned is because we are running things at the platform level, we have visibility. I cannot improve things which I cannot measure. And because now we are running everything on the platform, that visibility is a lot more evident to us. And this is where companies like Sedai would come into the picture, where having those reporting features and helping us identify where those wastages are and then autonomously able to reduce them would be of great value to companies like Guidewire.
I think you're giving us an idea for a Sedai marketing campaign, which is having your infrastructure go into the background or blur into the background. Okay, I'll credit you, Srivasan. So I'll come back to that. Let's talk about a big topic in the room, which is AI. Right, AI is everywhere, and I think a lot of the reasons why we're gathered here today is to talk about how that infusion of AI is going to play out in your cloud strategy. It's coming, right? You're having to look at it. It's at the forefront of all the conversations we're having today here at Sedai, and so I'd love to get your point of view, Srivasan, just on how you're thinking about AI and your cloud strategy.
Sure. I'd like to reiterate our prime focus is on getting our developers to build great fan-facing experiences. And in order to do that, we need to abstract away the complexity and the entropy that comes with running high-scale, complex systems. The entropy keeps increasing because your points of integration are increasing, your scale is increasing, and so on and so forth. These are the problem areas where AI really shines, because the more data points you can get, it can start reasoning about, there's a problem here, there might be a problem here, and start predicting what might happen when you have high load or a high traffic scenario and things like that. Our cloud strategy will start leaning into using AI more and more for understanding our systems, reconfiguring our systems, and so on and so forth, so that we can give back time to our developers so that they can build the products that our customers love.
So very much a move to reduce toil to drive innovation.
Yeah.
Great.
Similar to what Suresh said earlier, but in different words.
Excellent. And so, Sai, let's switch topics for a minute, just given your background and what you've experienced at several enterprise companies. Let's talk about governance and security, because oftentimes, there's a lot of demand to go faster. The business wants faster feature releases, faster apps to market, faster just overall innovation pace. And how do you look at that? What are your thoughts on sort of balancing that as it comes to kind of governance and security in the cloud? And how do you sort of think about those trade-offs?
Yeah, it's a broad topic, but my thoughts on that is It starts with chargeback model as a first step. That's as a foundation, right? That's a natural friction that drives the right behaviors, right? That's the first step. And the second step is also to make sure that, some of those platform level capabilities, it's, there is a greater awareness and understanding of, to what extent do we want to go? As an example, observability, right? There are scenarios where you actually have more observability data than the real data that your company needs. So it's, I'm not exaggerating it, but it's very close. There are those situations. We collect way more data than that's needed because we can. Distributed tracing is, many open source tools exist, and you can collect all the data just because you want to be able to troubleshoot one incident, right? So, but it's not free. So the governance is really about making sure that, how do you influence these practices in a way that, each team that, produces this data, they also have the ownership on that, right? That's another example, right? When it comes to the security, right? So this is, so making sure that complying to the enterprise security policies is the first and foremost thing, right? Making sure that, whether it is just-in-time access, whether it is making sure that, your microservices, your data is ransomware protected. It's not just, meeting the letter of the law, but it is living by the spirit. But by that means, like, you really had to demonstrate that, your data is really safe, and you actually restore, recover, and do the necessary tests, right? So, that's another example where, it's how to look at security.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Shrivastava, maybe I'll ask you, you're talking about sort of a lot of tooling out there to give you speeds and feeds. It's really kind of signal to noise to signal to noise. How do you look at that from your perspective in terms of management of the cloud and kind of getting ahead of potential issues?
Signal to noise in terms of observability data? Okay. I concur with Sai in that we have way too much signals than we need. Signal to noise is something that we need to constantly measure what's important for the business and define those KPIs and monitor the systems with and keep adjusting that. This has traditionally been an manual effort where at SeatGeek we have weekly operational reviews where we are looking at our KPIs, how our systems are performing, and constantly tuning that. And as Anup said, you can't change, you can't make something better if you can't measure it. And so we are constantly measuring those things. But we do have the problem of death by 1,000 dashboards. There are so many Datadog dashboards that we look at that become obsolete the day they are built, almost. And it's a constant challenge. And that may be an area where AI could potentially come in and say, hey, these are the metrics that you're really looking at, and these are the things that you seem to be really interested at. So the other things may not be needed. Humans are really bad at figuring out what the signal to noise is, especially if out of sight is out of mind. And that may be an area where we could potentially use AI as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Anup, same question to you. I think it's a really interesting one when you talk about an over proliferation of dashboards and metrics, and as you do that, metrics are subjective, and so how do you think about that from a Guidewire perspective?
The funny thing is that humans can only survive on abstractions, whereas AI thrives on details, right? I mean, needs all those details. You put it abstraction, unless it knows the level of details under the abstraction, it won't be able to make much sense of it. So we've been looking at multiple ways in how to reduce our noise in the signal to noise ratio. And that includes things like fire hosing stuff into AI agents as much as possible. Things like, I don't know if you guys use tools like K8GPT or Holmes GPT, etc., that helps us gather a lot of information from our clusters, and then based on that, make autonomous decisions at a later point in time. But right now, we don't trust it enough to make those decisions. We're using them more as giving us information or digested information that will help us make those decisions. Over time, our aim is that we put a human into the loop for some period of time, and then once we have enough confidence in that decision making for the set of signals that we have seen, then we could turn that on into an autonomous way. It's very much similar to how Sedai is doing with the resource management. So AI, like Suresh mentioned, and both Sureshes mentioned, I think is a reality we are not going to escape from. But it is also something like how, I don't know, 20 years back, 25 years back, when our Google came out, everybody thought, oh, Google search, it's, you know what, we don't need developers. We just search for things. It's farther from the truth. Similar way, I think AI would be great tools in the hands of people who can use it, which does mean that every engineer and every developer would have to upskill themselves to be able to use those tools effectively. I think there's a lot to come out, and it is not just in terms of observability, but also all the way through the SDLC lifecycle, where we could make use of coaching agents for testing, for observability, instead of doing things as an after fact, doing it ahead in order to make sure that we're doing the things right from the beginning.
Yeah, great point. Let's talk a little bit about trade-offs. And maybe Sebastian, over to you. How do you think about sort of the trade-offs between these areas of kind of cost and performance? What are you sort of looking at from a SeatGeek's perspective? Obviously, your business model is very interesting. You probably have high spikes in demand, and then times where you have low valleys where the app is not so much in demand. So how do you think about that? How do you balance that trade-off? And please tell us the story you were telling me last night around the NFL schedule. I thought that was really interesting around your business model.
Sure. These trade-offs ultimately are directed by the business outcomes and the business model. And for SeatGeek, it's very clear that we need to have performance as our number one thing, reliability and performance when it matters the most. And I'll tell the story of NFL schedule release. Last month, the NFL released their schedule, and that is historically the top GTV day for SeatGeek of the whole year. So we make we make the maximum amount of money in one day, and that's the NFL schedule release. And that's the day when SeatGeek has to work. It has to work for all of our fans. It has to work for all of our teams. So each of the NFL teams is making changes in their background. We have two parts. There's an enterprise application and there's a consumer application, and both of these are changing in real time, and both of these are being stressed. In that scenario, for us, performance is the most important thing, because we need to be available for our customers. We cannot take a hit in terms of if the site goes slow or something like that. So in those situations, for us, the trade-off is very clear. It is okay for us to pay more cost, but if that comes with performance gains, then that's what we'll trade off. And I think every business ultimately needs to make those trade-offs for themselves based on where they are in their business life cycle. Like I said, the day after the NFL schedule release, we might then trade off cost for performance, because our traffic has dipped quite a bit. And I was at Intuit, where the traffic patterns are very similar, because until April 14th, it'll be near zero. And then on April 15th, you'll have a huge spike, 600,000 concurrent users for the whole day. So the entire taxpayer base in US stress tests the system on that one day. So the trade-offs are ultimately dependent on what are the business outcomes that you want to deliver. And it can change day by day.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's a really interesting model. Sai, any comments on just how do you think about sort of trade-offs on cost, performance, and maybe going a little deeper? Are there times where maybe you or the company made a trade-off that maybe didn't work, and maybe anything you learned from that. So anything to add on trade-offs?
Yeah, so one, the load latency curve when it comes to the trade-off is a very important concept. What it is like, your application load, the performance characteristics, and the CPU utilization, memory utilization, the network utilization, all those things that go with that, right? Oftentimes it's like, we optimize for the weak link in the system, which is essentially you throw more hardware at the problem. And people don't realize that we're throwing hardware at the problem because each microservices may have a certain level of resource utilization. It's a hard problem to solve because it is dependent on data. Data fundamentally have a skewness. You have large customers, hot data, and all these things you can't deterministically know at the runtime when you access that data. And suddenly you have one VM running hot, and hence the performance get impacted for that service. But when you look at the whole system, you have many such services interdependent on each other. How do you optimize for predictable performance? That's what your customers want, right? And this is where, there has never been a good answer, right? It's always about you either throw hardware at the problem or you take the risk. Like your P95 may be good from performance, but your P99 drops off, right? So, and that's the reason why managing the tail latency is a very hard engineering problem. I think that's where the Sedai really come into play. It's not just optimizing for the cost, but it is managing the tail latency, because you lose customers when they fall into that category, tail latency, right? That's a huge trade-offs to get it right. Another thing is the connection management. Oftentimes, when do you retry it? What is your timeout mechanisms? How do the whole thing works together? Because you may be optimistically retrying it, but in the process, you're holding many connections across the system. And there is a cost that goes with it, where it's very high cost to be paid for that connection management. And the last thing is the caching, right? Caching is, a lot of people think caching is free and it should do it. It's a no-brainer. But it's actually opposite, because you can cache it per service at the expense of your data quality, or you can rely on an underlying system to provide the caching, better caching with a better consistency, but you may not get as much performance out of it as you would want, because you still have to make few network hops to get to that system. Like, where do you draw the line? Oftentimes people err on the side of, I want to create caching for my own microservices. But then you don't get the invalidation right, because it's a very hard thing to get right, invalidation, right? So, and I think that's a trade-off. That's an enterprise-wide trade-off, right? I am more biased towards there has to be a caching at the data serving layer rather than be done at the application level because of these challenges, right? Because the data invalidation and things like that. So these are some of the trade-offs that are important to get it right.
Great. I think excellent point. Let's switch topics to something that is very relevant for us as we're talking to prospects and customers, is the world of LLMs, right? They're upon us, and so how are you thinking about that from a Guidewire perspective? Just the overall management, optimization, cost category for what we're really at the forefront of, which is the world of LLM modeling.
So again, Guidewire has many business units within itself, and each so there's, with regards to LLMs, there are multiple ways you can slice and dice use cases, right? There is one that is all internally driven in terms of improving performance. There's others which are going to not just improve performance, but also provide business value to our customers. So there's two parts to it. One could be about fraud detection. The other could be about, how do I write my code better? Or how do I optimize my cloud better? They're driven differently, and I mean, like with most companies and the daily rate at which things are changing in this world, I can't say that, oh, we just picked one LLM. We are trying everything out that we can. For example, I've been using Cloud Code, and I've been blown away with how much I could get done in a matter of 3 days, which would have otherwise taken me a week or more, right? And there are other teams which are doing things that would help our customers build applications better on top of our Guidewire platform. Functions, all of those things. I think there's no distinct one way. You just have to pick and choose the LLM best, feasible for the area that you're trying to solve for. So Guidewire is looking at all of those things. I hope at some point there's going to be some consolidation, and then we can all choose one LLM. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And I think it's a good thing. I think having that democratization of functions, which are very different, just like you and I are wired differently, right? So I think those LLMs are also wired differently, better for certain areas. So we'll be looking at them separately and trying to figure out where they fit into the operative or the business areas that we have.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sai, maybe over to you. Any comments there on just what you're seeing in terms of, there's a lot of experimentation going on, a lot of cost being generated by hosting a lot of these LLM models. So how do you think about that? Are you seeing sort of that kind of cost category as an area of concern?
I mean, where I'm in right now, the space, I think the biggest promise from AI is really around transforming the healthcare as it stands today. And I'm very optimistic that 10 years from now, there is going to be improvement in patient care, there's going to be cost optimization, and there's going to be a lot more transparency. All those three things are possible with LLMs and AI in general advancements, right? Beyond that, I think more from how it helps technologists, engineers, right? There is always the problem of the impedance mismatch between when two teams are interacting with each other. The language that they speak is different, right? So the LLMs can standardize and normalize that. I can ask the question in the way that I know how to ask, and it can convert that into structured API calls in the back end to get the response back and using the RAG. And now suddenly you are interacting with it. I think that is another promise that will have a dramatic impact in terms of improving the productivity for all types of personas across the company.
Great, thanks for that. Anything else to add there, Sriracha?
I would say that we are still in an early stage of experimentation with AI and LLMs in general. So I can speak for SeatGeek, where we're just trying out various things. So at this point of time, it's not about, it's more about what can we deliver, what value can we deliver for our customers, for our developers using AI, what are those different areas. So we are in the mode of fast experimentation at this point, and we are trying out various things. Over time, those will coalesce and we'll accrete into a few areas where AI is super effective, and that's when we'll start focusing on performance and cost and so on and so forth.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, last, I see we're running low on time. We want to save a little bit of time for Q&A. Anup, last question for you, because I think one of the questions that has been asked this morning by Tim to Suresh is, folks that are on that autonomous journey, what, kind of maybe a two-part question, what do you have to get right to kind of go down that journey of autonomous? And how do you see sort of a vendor like Sedai helping you along that journey?
Wow, that's a tough one. But taking the first part about what do you need to do is have the base functionality to be able to affect a change fast and be able to roll back that change if it doesn't work out. If you do not have the rails for that, then autonomous becomes is another pain that we have to deal with, as Suresh pointed out about the promises of the cloud. So I think that is important. And beyond that, it is a mindset of constant experimentation, right? I can tell for a fact that Guidewire did not get where we are by sitting tight. It's because we did a lot of micro experimentations, and we took risks, controlled risks. We were not putting any of our customers at risk, our own operations, etc. So unless there's a marked change in the attitude, the mindset, and the rails on which to effect these autonomous changes, it'll be very hard to move forward. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of your question.
Just anything that Sedai can do to help you kind of through your autonomous journey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so been working with Benji, whom I know from a previous employment as well. There he is. About how I think Sai mentioned about chargebacks, right? I'd like to see governance is something, it cannot be an afterthought, right? You have to set some of these parameters very early in your journey to be able to get to a point where you can show back, if not charge back, the cost. And when you do that and allow micro experimentations to be able to see the benefits of the autonomy or any other sort of changes that you build into the system and see the effect of it, right? The cause and effect should be very clear. When that happens, you automatically change behaviors, right? And because now you can measure and you can then figure out, am I improving the system or making it worse? So I think Sedai can definitely help in that aspect. The reporting is something that I've asked for. And so I think the team is working on that. We'd love to see those benefits accrue back.
Great. Well, I've peppered you with enough questions. We've got a few minutes here, so I think we're going to open it up to the audience and see if there's any other questions.
Hi. I have a specific question to Sai from Oracle. The moment I saw Oracle, I thought of asking about agentic progress that we are seeing, right? And also contemplating between which LLMs to use, as Anup and Srivatsan also mentioned. So at Oracle, is there any such contemplation that you have already gone through or going through in building agents for your customers? LLM-based agents, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not at liberty to speak about the Oracle specific things. So, but we can chat offline. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. We were having the discussion earlier about the debate between autonomous infrastructure and the people, and I think that was settled that there will be a role for people, and it'll just elevate to higher tasks, etc., which is great. I was kind of curious about your view on what's going to happen to APM, kind of the classic APM layer, which is Datadog and New Relic and obviously Dynatrace, et cetera, and other open source infrastructure that's coming in that allows you to roughly do the same stuff. Do you think that remains in place and autonomous just becomes a layer on top, or what's your view on how the architecture changes? Because directionally, scale-out applications are a thing that is going to stay, right? So scale-out is happening across transactional applications, data applications, and AI applications, if you roughly look at the three flavors of the ice cream, if you may. I'm just kind of curious on your view on APM.
Is that a question to me or
anyone? The panel?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts is I think the need for APM will go lesser and lesser, but it's very important. But I think it will be heavily optimized because a lot of what APM does is due to the lack of these autonomous systems like Sedai, right? Once you have that, the need for triaging, troubleshooting, the root cause analysis, that's taken care by and large. Then you need insights about your application that can be more targeted logging that you can do. So that you still need APM, but the more optimized version. That's how I look at it.
I'll take a different stance actually. So I think APM will become even more important as the foundation for the autonomous systems to be built on top of. May not be as an interface to humans. So today APM is more of an interface to humans for making human decisions. But APM will become foundational for the autonomous systems to then interface with and make those decisions. And you're absolutely right that the AI systems are going to generate insights. And then those insights have to be built on a foundation of extremely high fidelity data that's coming from APM systems. So I would say they would become more important in providing high fidelity data at high throughput and near real time for the AI models to then start taking decisions in near real time.
I concur with C. Wilson because so the first part when you asked about Datadog is an APM interface, right? So if I can attach an agent to a running system and get all the telemetry of that system at a high sampling rate, which at this point most of these hosted systems would charge an arm and leg for. That high fidelity information, like C. Wilson was mentioning, becomes the input because, like I said, AI thrives on details. The more detail you throw at it, the more accurate it can become in order to make the changes necessary to your system. So I think APM would not go away, but the interface, like he mentioned, the UI through which you have to do those gleaning and then making a decision would become much more simplified through either an MCP agent or through a chatbot that can give you information as you ask or do the necessary activities and then send you an email saying that, hey, I saw this happening and I fixed it by doing this. That's probably how it's going to go.
Well, I have an angry clock flashing at us to say we are out of time. Anoop, Sai, Shrivastan, thank you for the discussion. I hope you all had as good a time as I did going through
Thank
this.
you for having me.
Thank you.